seawater.
Hello everyone, hope you all are enjoying your day today. It's been 6 years since the last Oxenfree game came out, and I've been a fan of Night School Studio ever since. They have done some decently good games, especially on mobile, but aside from After Party, I've enjoyed most of them. After Party wasn't that good, though it did have some good music and some good visuals. So I was very nervous to see how Night School Studio would handle their second game, because their first game is amazing. I love it. One of my favorite video games of all time, and I just love the storytelling, the writing, and truth be told, I was just completely nervous. So the game was announced in 2021, and I was so hyped for it. If you've seen, it's my most popular video because I was like, oh, my thoughts on Oxenfree 2, and it got a lot of views. And yeah, I was just hyped for it, just excited. And then it was delayed to 2022, which, I mean, sure, it's fine. I could wait another year. And then,
what the fuck y'all do?
I don't know.
What the fuck y'all? God damn!
but it doesn't matter. As long as the game comes out in good quality and everything is not rushed, because I prefer things to be delayed than to be rushed. So it's finally out. It came out in July 12th, and I'm reviewing it July 15th. I played it on release, and I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed it. It was a very satisfying game with new characters and new setting, new gameplay, and some familiar stuff. So let me just get right into it. In terms of characters, we have Riley and Jacob. These are our two main characters, and they're both great. They're not as good as Alex and how do you call it, her little band of misfits. And the reason why I say that is mainly because Alex had this young energy teen to her, you know, and it's mainly because of the performance by Erin Yvette, and she's fantastic. Her voice work is amazing, right? So it's kind of hard to live up to that level of standard, but they make it up for it by, like, in terms of character and more professionalism, since all of them are, the main characters are older and they're adults. People think they're 40 in the game, which is funny, but I don't think they're 40. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that this time you play as adults rather than teenagers, which makes the overall character and dynamic between them more interesting, because it's adults that are encountering this situation for the first time instead of teenagers, which I find a little bit more interesting. But they don't have the energy or chemistry as the other characters from the last game, but it's still good nevertheless, and I enjoy their reactions to things that, well, compared to how the teenagers reacted, I still enjoyed it. Riley's character is very good. Depending on your choices, you can either make her a horrible person or you can make her a good person, just like the last game. Making her a good person makes her more interesting, and I like how they made her like a strong female character but still very flawed. Someone who knows what's going to happen and is going to make a mistake in the future, but inevitably has no choice but to live up to it, and instead of preventing it, which I like. I like that type of character dynamic. And not to mention, she has a very good arc, depending on your choices, of course. So I'll bring up the subplots of the game. No spoilers in particular, but the whole game also revolves around a cult, and obviously the ghosts and the portals and stuff like that. So in this game, I think the ghost portal stuff and all the spooky scary stuff is amazing. Well done. They introduced rifts, which you can time travel, which I think is pretty cool. And in terms of how scary it is, it's a little less scarier, but it's still pretty tense. I did jump a few times, but mainly because it's like a sudden static sound, and it's like, oh fuck, you know, just scares you, you know. I like that. Cool stuff. Now I also have to talk about the new system in the game, which is a radio, which you get to interact with other characters. I enjoyed it because they get more characters and more unique interactions. You can call them up at any point in the game. if it's available, of course. But I find it very good because, you know, you can do like little things that will change the outcome of how they treat you or what will happen to them. Of course, it's a new system to kind of take over the radio, because you don't use the radio that much in this game. In fact, I think you use more of the walkie-talkie than the radio, and mainly because, you know, adult, you have to communicate because it's part of your job. So I think that's pretty cool. It makes the game less repetitive and not just the same as the last game, of course, because a good sequel introduces new elements rather than just keeping everything the same. Speaking of which, the graphics themselves are exactly the same as the last one, but we're in a different location, and you get a little bit more trees and more color, which is cool. And you also get more higher elevations and new settings, new houses, cool stuff like that. And yeah, it's a little bit more expansive, but there's a problem with that, and I'll get to my first issue. Because the game, while it runs mostly good, there are some frame rate issues, and it mostly happens during the parts where the game zooms out and you see the wider scope. Mainly because I think it was since it's on release and the last game didn't zoom out as much as this one. Maybe because there's more stuff to look at in the background, maybe it makes it run a little bit more slower. But the frame rates were a big issue during those big sequences, at least for me. And I played on the PlayStation 5 and it did have frame rates, but the game never completely dropped below, I'd say, I don't know how many frames it's running, but it definitely didn't drop all the way low, like in terms of Callisto or what other game did I play that definitely had a low frame rate? Oh, Mass Effect Andromeda. That one also had low frame rates. But considering, you know, it's a small indie studio, I'm sure it's fine. At least the game didn't crash. That's good. It did not crash. No graphic issues, no nothing. Just the frame rate. It'll probably be patched in a few days, which is fine. It's just a minor issue. Another story issue actually I have to bring up is the cult. Now, I thought the cult would be a very big, you know, importance to the story and very creepy. But honestly, when you find out what the cult does and, you know, the members and stuff like that, it's kind of underwhelming. And it's like not a very satisfying conclusion, at least in terms of the cult storyline. And eventually there is like a twist in the game, and I'm not gonna lie, I loved it. I loved this twist. It made me more excited once I was heading towards the climax of the story. I won't mention what the twist is until later in the spoiler section. But I just feel like the new cult members, the characters, they weren't very well established, even though technically one of them is, but I couldn't connect with their character arc. And eventually with these cult members, what you learn about them and the main characters, you get to the ending where you get to choose 3 options, or 2 depending on a specific choice you made before you head to the climax. But still, and the game makes it seem like, oh, like this is a hard choice. And if you play the game, in my opinion, I don't think it's a hard choice. There's one clear choice that makes it the best ending possible, and everyone ends up happy in that ending. I have seen the other endings just to see how they are. They're still good, don't get me wrong. There's no, oh my god, this ending sucked, you know? No. They're all good. Every ending serves its purpose, and there are consequences for the action. There is no loophole and stuff like that. I love that. I love when games stick to the decision that is made by the player themselves. And I gotta admire Night School for that, because if there was some loophole where it's like, oh, you can save everyone, I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. It's like if Life is Strange, you were making that last decision at the last episode where you're like, oh, you gotta sacrifice Arcadia Bay or sacrifice Chloe. Oh, but actually, there's a third choice where you can save all of them. Nah, that's just, I don't know, that's lame. I like games where you're like, okay, one decision, you gotta make it, and whatever happens, happens, and you'll deal with the consequences. It's exactly like real life. Love it. But there is one more thing I want to talk about. The soundtrack is amazing. I don't know how to pronounce the composer's name, but he's fantastic. Each soundtrack, each score, each sound is just amazing. It really adds to the atmosphere of the game, and it makes the game more entertaining. Also, not to mention that in terms of the game itself, it definitely feels like it has a bigger budget than the last one. There's save slots. It has a menu with like settings, like more settings to add on, and not to mention, what's the right word? More gameplay elements that wouldn't have been in the first one because maybe budget issues. I'm not sure, but this game definitely feels bigger, but not too big to the point where it's like, oh, this is completely different. No, it's similar in a different location though, and new characters and new setting, even though eventually you do go back to the old setting, of course. So this game is great. It's a satisfying conclusion. I hope they don't make any more, because the way the game ends for me, it's like, yeah, that's good. I forgot to mention this, but the game has the funniest decision where you either get to smash a radio or you don't, and it will affect the character's, feelings towards you. And I was like, fuck it, smash it. And as soon as I smash it, there's a trophy that pops up. I'm like, that's hilarious. And the character, the way the character reacts makes it even funnier. And I'm just belly laughing, and I had to pause the game after that because I was dying. It was insane. But it does have my favorite trophy win of all time.
No one will care when you die. Believe that.
So, what did I think of Oxenfree 2? I'll give it maybe like a 9. I do think the cult stuff was kind of underwhelming, and the final decision, while an obvious one, still satisfying nevertheless. And yeah, it's a fun game. Would I play it as much as the first one? I probably still, because the first one, first Oxenfree is fantastic, and I consider the ending to be unsatisfactory in a good way, But this one is a satisfying ending. Dude, I can't pronounce that word. What the hell? Anyways, now it's spoiler time. If you have played the first Oxenfree game, cool, stick around. If you have not, leave. Score 9 out of 10. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
He's actually pretty good at this.
So, the characters from the last game, Alex and her homies, are all back. Well, technically, Alex is the only one that does most of the talking. I'm so glad they brought back Aaron Yvette, because if they brought back other actors, it just would have been weird. But I'm so glad they brought her back, because, look, I like Riley, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think like she has the energy that Alex does. Because how to call it, when Alex is like being a very emotional, screaming and crying and like scared, panic, but it's probably because Aaron Yvette is such a good voice actress. That's probably why. But like, still, her energy really adds to the climax, and I was so hooked. And of course, her interactions with Riley were hilarious in both a comedic way and a very dark way. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.